Well, Whoopi Goldberg stirred some controversy on The View yesterday when she made some remarks about the Holocaust. But then she went on The Late Show with Stephen Colbert after she had already apologized during the day, and then seemed to walk back her apology a little bit, only to then apologize once again today. So we're going to go through this whole timeline here and respond. But let's take a look at what Whoopi said initially.
Let's be truthful about it, because the Holocaust isn't about race. No, it's not about race.
No, it's about a different race.
But it's not about race. It's not about race.
What is it about?
Because it's about man's inhumanity to man.
So there you have it. That sparked a whole outcry on the internet, on Twitter, on social media. Trey Goins-Phillips, Billy Hallowell with me. Guys, why did this stir up such a hornet's nest?
Well, I guess the entirety of what we know of Hitler is that he said things like, quote, the Jews' presence is a, quote, race tuberculosis of the peoples. I mean, the word race was a centerpiece of his entire campaign against the Jewish people. He viewed them as another race. And you can even hear in the co-hosts of The View there, you hear that no at first, and you're like, what is that no in reference to? And then they start to sort of push back, because it just seems like this is common knowledge of what Hitler believed.
Yeah, and I think as a Christian, we can try to step back a little bit, and you can see, I think part of the reason why this immediately sparked such a firestorm and why these conversations so often do is because we're using really nebulous terms. Like race means so many different things to so many different people, but as believers, we know that God created humanity, male and female, and that's the only distinction he gives. He doesn't give all these racial differences. That's something that we concocted over time. There certainly are ethnic differences, and there's been a lot of evils perpetrated on other human beings because of those. But the idea of race is something that's really tricky because it's, like I said, so nebulous. But I want to mention, this is what Whoopi posted on Twitter just hours after the initial controversy broke out. This was her first apology. She said, on today's show, I said the Holocaust is not about race, but about man's inhumanity to man. I should have said it is about both. As Jonathan Greenblatt, he's the leader of the Anti-Defamation League, he said, the Holocaust was about the Nazis' systemic annihilation of the Jewish people, who they deemed to be an inferior race. I stand corrected. The Jewish people around the world have always had my support and that will never waver. I'm sorry for the hurt I've caused. Written with my sincerest apologies, Whoopi Goldberg. So that was the initial apology, but like you alluded to, Dan, things evolved again from there.
Yeah, she decided to go on The Late Show with Stephen Colbert. Now, I don't know if this was, I'm assuming that these things usually get scheduled out in advance. So she's on The Late Show with Stephen Colbert. He asked her about it, and here's what she had to say.
Most of the Nazis were white people, and most of the people they were attacking were white people. So to me, I'm thinking, how can you say it's about race if you are fighting each other? So it all really began because I said, how will we explain to children what happened in Nazi Germany? I said, this wasn't racial. This was about white on white. And everybody said, no, it was racial. And so that's what this all came from. So once again, don't write me anymore. I know how you feel. Okay, I already know. I get it. And I'm going to take your word for it and never bring it up again.
Yeah, Billy, I don't think that response went over too well. And it was an interesting PR moment, because you don't want to, when you have to apologize in the media industry for something. So people say things that they wish they didn't say, and they apologize. It happens. But when your apology is going on for multiple days, then it's really a problem, and you are kind of botching things up, because she had to come out on the show today and apologize once again.
Well, yeah, and understanding, again, the concept, it was explained to her, she apologized for it, and then went and spoke about it in a way that again said, well, that it was white on white. And so it again seemed like she wasn't understanding the context. And context is essential in all of these situations, right? When you're talking about complex things like race and ethnicity, and as Trey as you said, race is a very complicated term because it's constructed in different ways depending on where you are. But the context here is what Hitler believed about the Jews, again, that they were a different race. This is well known. It's a little shocking to me that a handler or somebody with any sort of knowledge wouldn't have said, this is really what you should say. You've been in this business a long time. You're going to go on after your apology. Here's how you should frame it. And that she would choose to, again, wade back into that. It's a little mind-boggling.
Yeah, I think the issue, I was just gonna say, Dan, I think the issue often comes when you try to compare evil to evil. We don't need to compare evils here. Both are despicable, whether you're talking about racism here in the United States as we know it, and slavery and Jim Crow and all of those atrocities, or you're talking about the Holocaust and the evils that were perpetrated also in the name of racism, according to Hitler and Nazism. So you don't need to compare the two. Both are deplorable and disgusting examples of human evil. And I think you get in trouble when you try seemingly to compare the two, which is what appears to be what Whoopi was doing.
Yeah. And this is interesting because it's ABC Disney, and we know that a high-profile firing recently was Gina Carano, who was fired from The Mandalorian, which is a hit show, Star Wars show, because in part of a Nazi analogy she made. And she was just kind of talking about some Orwellian type things that are going on now, and she used a Nazi analogy, and that got her fired. So I wonder what she's thinking as she's watching all this happen. And clearly, somebody is not happy because Whoopi, obviously, in her Colbert appearance, was very defiant, and I'm not going to talk about this anymore. And then the next day on the show, they've got, the ADL's on there, and then she's apologizing again. And she said, yesterday on our show, I misspoke. I tweeted about it last night, but wanted to hear from me directly. And then she said, I said it wasn't about race. Instead, it was about man's inhumanity to man. But it is indeed about race because Hitler and the Nazis considered Jews to be an inferior race. She said, now words matter and mine are no exception. I regret my comments. And as I said, I stand corrected. I also stand with the Jewish people, as they know and y'all know, because I've always done that. And so it was Jonathan Greenblatt from the Anti-Defamation League that was on The View today. So clearly, somebody not satisfied with her response there and had this go on again. Is you don't want to drag out an apology for multiple days.
No. And I think, the one thing she had said in the initial statement, right, about man's inhumanity to man, it was an interesting statement because when you get to the core of it, that's the basis of all of so many of our problems, right? But it's sin. Sin is the word that maybe, I don't know if that's not in her vocabulary or not, I'm not sure, but we know as believers, that is the core of what all of our issues are. Any issue that deals with ethnicity, when you're putting somebody down or mistreating them because of the way they look or because of the lineage of where they come, that is an evil. And we know that that is a sin. And so she really missed the mark, obviously, and I can't hold her to any sort of standard. I don't know what's in her heart or what she believes, but it was intriguing to hear her say that and then to go so off the rails and saying it wasn't about race. But I do think this is an opportunity for us to talk about sin, right, at the core of all of this.
Yeah, and I think, Dan, I think we have a clip of Jonathan Greenblatt, the CEO of the Anti-Defamation League, explaining how he sees the Nazi and the Holocaust and all of that, and how it was, according to them, obviously a race war. So we can toss to that clip.
Whoopi, there's no question that the Holocaust was about race. That's how the Nazis saw it as they perpetrated the systematic annihilation of the Jewish people across continents, across countries, with deliberate and ruthless cruelty. And literally, the first page of Maus, the book you were talking about yesterday, Whoopi, it opens with a quote from Hitler. And literally it says, the Jews undoubtedly are a race, but they are not human. You see, Hitler's ideology, the Third Reich, was predicated on the idea that the Aryans, the Germans, were a, quote, master race, and the Jews were a subhuman race. It was a racialized anti-Semitism.
Yeah.
So I think that's the tough thing here is remembering context when we have these conversations. And I get you're on live TV and you're speaking passionately, so it's hard to have these conversations. But it's odd, like you were saying, Billy, that this has gone on for a few days now, and it seems like both sides of this conversation are just standing their ground. And I think that it's something we have to infuse some grace into, but also Whoopi should, I would hope, realize that maybe the word choices here were not the wisest.
Yeah, and then just the what is the purpose? Like, why try to sort of delineate the Holocaust in that way, and to try to it almost seemed, whether it's intentional or not, anybody's guess. Hopefully not, give her the benefit of the doubt. But it did seem like she was minimizing this and trying to elevate one wrong over the other wrong. And clearly, when you look at the Holocaust, it's hard to find, for all the wrongs in the world, it's hard to find one more wrong than exterminating 6 million people that you view as a subhuman race. It seems to be like, why are we having that competition? Can't we just acknowledge what it was and go from there? But I think that's why you have so many people kind of pushing back, because you can't allow these sorts of views that are incorrect to sort of fester and to in this world where we have so much information, and then over generations, we see in the Bible, guys, that it doesn't take very many generations for people to forget things, and so. Yeah. You got to go out of your way to make sure that these ideas don't linger, and that the next generation down the road has no idea what happened.
Well, especially with raging anti-Semitism all over the world, it seems to be getting worse. And this is something historically, and I guess it points to maybe the fact, I know there were some surveys out showing that substantial numbers of people don't know what anti-Semitism is. And obviously, scripturally, you go back to the Bible, the Hebrews were held in slavery for hundreds of years. There's a whole history of this group of people, this ethnicity, that is really important to understand. But beyond that, even with the Holocaust, they were sort of talking about it in this vacuum of this one event, this horrific event that happened leading up to the Holocaust. The Jews had 400 laws and restrictions placed on them in Germany, restricting every facet of their way of life. That is very strategically targeted at a race. So to me, the I think glaring piece here is that a lot of people don't really know the history. And what do they say about history? If we don't know it, we can repeat it. And so it's important that we educate people on it. And as Trey said, have grace in the process. And so I'm hopeful that this latest apology is the actual apology and that she truly is sorry.
Yeah. All right, guys. Well, you can read more about this story on faithwire.com and cbnnews.com. Billy, Trey, thanks for joining us.